In this nugget, we continue our discussion about Active Directory and specifically automating account creation. We'll take a look here at a couple of tools that aren't really used very often anymore, but they're still around, so I briefly discuss LDIF-DE as well as CSV-DE. CSV-DE especially is still a legitimate way to import an account, but normally we're going to probably be using DSAdd, and the DSAdd also has some cousins such as DSQuery, DSGet, DSMod, some other commands that you'll see. And then we'll also show you PowerShell here. I'm going to put up on nuggetlab.com for you a sample script that you can use for your own purposes, and it's very easy to modify for whatever you need. And then also I'm going to show you how to create your own comma-separated value file that may have the payload data that you need to work in conjunction with that script. Hey, as you've gone about creating user accounts in your environment, have you ever come up with any that the first initial plus the last name turns out to be something really weird? Sometimes it kind of actually spells a bad word or something like that. I searched for these. I'd used my Google foo to try to find some unfortunate usernames, and I did actually find several. There's some websites that are kind of dedicated to that cause, but many of them are too graphic to even show you. So this is the closest one I could come up with, and I might get in trouble even for this one. But you get the idea there. Some of these usernames are just quite hilarious when you put them together, unless you happen to be this person. How would you like to log on every day having to type that in? Anyway, what we're going to be talking about here is really just how to work with user accounts and to automate things. Now, let's get started here with the different methods that are available. The first of which, by the way, is LDIF-DE followed by CSV-DE. These are kind of tools that are falling by the wayside a little bit. Some people still have kind of an investment in them because they've created a lot of scripts that revolve around these tools and so on. But going forward in Microsoft land, I don't think these are going to be heavily an issue. I think we're going to be looking primarily at DSAdd and PowerShell methods. So I'm just going to briefly show you a document that I've created for you up on nuggetlab.com that is there for your reference called LDIF-DE versus CSV-DE. By the way, LDIF stands for LDAP, Interchange Format Directory Exchange. So you can see why they used an acronym. That's a big mouthful there. Anyway, here's a kind of a rundown of what each one does and some things that they both have in common. For LDIF, one of the first things you'll usually do is you want to export first. And the reason for that is so you can get an idea for the exported data, and it would export something like this, so that you can see it's block-style data, and it would give you an idea for what you would need to type in for importing data. Okay, so this is what it's looking for. Anyway, the file that we would use would be export user.ldf or whatever you want to name it. Here's the name of the server I'm looking at. I want to go to the subtree, which means any organizational units inside of it as well. And here are the kinds of items I'm looking for. Object category of a person with the object class of a user and a given name of asterisk, meaning just anybody. I could also do an asterisk like a Star Jones, and that would give me anybody with any first name and the last name Jones, for example, something like that. So you can use the wildcard there, and then a -L. That's not an I, that's an L. And then you specify which attributes you're interested in, and these kind of explain themselves. And then, as I said before, this is kind of what it spits out at you. There's also another tool called CSV-DE, which is actually very similar. So if I wanted to export using CSV-DE, we would do pretty much the same thing. And then what would happen here is it would create this file for us, okay, which is a comma-separated value file. Then we could go into it, modify it, fiddle around with it, whatever we wanted to do. And then we could import with it using CSV-DE with a -I and then a -F specifying this file name. And this would just be a comma-separated value file. Very often the CSV file doesn't come from this export. It really often comes from a database export. Maybe you can ask Human Resources for a list of new employees that are starting next week. And they might spit out a CSV file for you, and you could then go about creating your accounts automatically. Now, just real quick and dirty here, I'm going to show you how to do an import using CSV-DE. I'm going to talk also more specifically about how to create a comma-separated value file, particularly using Excel, but I'll be more specific about that when I talk about DSAdd here shortly. But for the time being, just notice that I do have a file here. It's called CSV-DE data, and I used a spreadsheet to create all of this information. Basically, what happens is each one of these column headers, this represents a column in Excel, should have a value under here that corresponds to it. So the distinguished name is what you see that I've got highlighted. The object class is going to be a user. Okay. Oops, too much highlighting going on at once here. Object class is user. the given name and common name is Tucson user 01, and so on. And I figured out a way to replicate all of this and autofill it all. So you'll get the idea here shortly. Also, again, when we look at CSVDE. Now, my objective is to put all those new users here in Tucson. I don't have any users there. If I refresh the screen, you can see that indeed there's nobody there. But if I run a PowerShell or command prompt as an administrator, then I should be able to import a whole bunch of users all at once. Watch this. I just typed in CSVDE, which is our command, and a -I, because by default it'll export data instead of importing it. And that can be useful if you want to find out what kinds of values this program is going to look for. But I already know what I need, so I'm going to do an import of a file, and the file path is right here. A -J is for the log file location. I don't know why they use J. You would have thought that they would use L for log file instead. But anyway, it's J, and you specify the directory without specifying any files particularly, okay? It'll create its own files if it has any errors. So then we'll go ahead and press enter here, and we see that it has now loaded 50 users successfully. Wow, that was fast too, wasn't it? Now we can start to see how this thing can really save you some time. Now I didn't assign any passwords, so all of these accounts are disabled, and that might be useful, again, in a lab environment or for a new department where none of these people are actually at work yet. You're just creating their accounts in advance. Now, I think that's pretty well all we need for LDIF and CSVDE. I think the focus on the exam is mostly going to be on DSAD and PowerShell, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got in our existing structure and see what else we can build. First of all, notice that BISBE just kind of dangling out here. It's the only organizational unit I created. I put all my accounts in there. The NLab users, I went ahead and deleted that one. Just it doesn't really kind of serve any organizational purpose like you would have in a hierarchy where you have different divisions or different geographical areas than the organizational units within that geographical area, for example. So here, I want to come up with a better structure for this. Now, I can use DSAdd to make that happen. Generally speaking, with DSAdd, you can use DSAdd OU for organizational unit, or user. I don't have any in here, but you can put user there instead of OU for a user account, and then group for a group account. Okay, so those are the kinds of things you can use this primarily. And with DSAdd here, I've just created a batch file that's going to spit all of these things out for me. It's going to create a whole structure of an AZ, and inside of AZ, it's going to have Phoenix and Tucson, and then Phoenix admins, some user accounts here, and so on. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to just go to this batch file, right-click on it, and choose Run as Administrator, and yes, and then we'll see that it has now created all of these. By the way, I also put a pause in my batch files, unless it has to run fully unattended, because if there were any errors in what I typed in there, I want to see the error message. Without a pause, it'll just flash on the screen and go away, and I'll never really know what it was trying to tell me here. So we need to refresh the screen in order to see what it created, and there's a Z there with all of its organizational units and sub OUs and so forth here, and you can see it's kind of created a full structure for me right here. All right. I do want you to notice. Let me just go up here to like AZ. I do want you to notice that by using the DSAdd command, that these are not protected objects. Actually, we have to go to Advanced View to see that, because remember, to view protected objects, you can't see that directly unless you go to View and Advanced Features. So here I'll go to AZ and Properties, and notice that on the object item, they are not protected from accidental deletion. So just be aware of that. If I go to my BISBE account, or my BISBE organizational unit, we'll see that it is protected from accidental deletion, which kind of has an interesting side effect. You see, normally I would be able to drag BISBE into AZ, but that's actually a part of it's just the way moving a file is. It's actually a deletion. It's a copy, a move, and then a deletion of the original, but it can't do that because access is denied since it's a protected object. So just another thing to bear in mind if you do drag and drop from within Active Directory users and computers. Now, it's probably a good idea that Microsoft disallowed that by default. The reason being, if you get really large organizations where you have a lot going on and hundreds or even thousands of OUs and sub-OUs and so on, it's very difficult sometimes to drag things into the right location. So, for example, I might have to scroll down 5 miles down here and then drag something 5 miles back up into the AZ organizational unit. I don't think we want to really do that. It's too easy to let go of the mouse in the wrong place, and you might not even see where you dropped it. Oh, and for this, for the time being, because of some scripting that I'm going to do shortly here, I'm going to move Bisbee back out to the root of the domain. And we can just drag it back in later on if we want to. But for the rest of this, I want to show you a spreadsheet that I created. And this is going to allow you to create accounts and then have them automatically moved into a specific organizational unit. Take a look at what we're doing here. I'm just putting in the name of a user here. And just pay attention to this one line for the start of this. So there's my user, and then I have a dsadd statement here. So a dsadd user, comma name equals Bisbee user 01. Okay, same user I typed in over here. OU equals Bisbee, DC equals Nugalab, DC equals com. All right. Notice how that actually appears though in the formula. This is something I'm using called the concatenate item, and what this will do is it will combine two or more values together. So the first thing I'm entering in is just a plain text value of dsadd user cn equals, and that's why we see here dsadd user cn equals. Okay, and then the Bisbee user 01 actually comes from A2. This is just some Excel foo that we're using here. It points back to A2 over here. Then it continues the text value. It's concatenating all this together. OU equals Bisbee, DC equals Nugalab, DC equals com. And then this is the user principal name. Again, you can see it's concatenated as you see up here. This is available for you on nugalab.com, and you can study this for yourself if you like as well. The display name is going to be Bisbee user 1. Here's the password that we're going to use for these accounts. You do have to be careful of that because it puts this password in the clear, so you've got to be aware of that. However, the user will have to change the password at their first logon. This is a home directory for that user. In previous versions of Windows, like Windows Server 2008, there was a bug that persisted in this for a long time. It started, I think, with Windows 2000 and 2003, and still in 2008, and now there's a solution. Actually, someone recommended this to me on our CBT Nuggets Facebook page, which is a very handy tip. So I've been able to figure out how to concatenate this to work it out. The reason why I bring this up is because Microsoft used to recommend that you could just put on the end of this $, username, $, but it was broken and it never ever worked. So here I'm just using concatenate to do a similar thing to what I've done here earlier in the same line. And then here, similarly, again, I'm pointing them to a profiles directory. If you're not familiar with home directories and profiles, let me explain those just briefly. A home directory is often where network users will store their data files. So that instead of storing the files on their local computer, it's stored on a central file server somewhere, and that way we can kind of centrally virus scan, centrally back up, and so on, all of those users' files. It's usually mapped to a drive letter, in this case drive H, and that's what I usually like, so it's H for home. Makes it easy to remember. And then profile, you don't usually have to have those, but some people had mixed results with the success of this, but it allows you to keep all of the user settings, such as their desktop icons, anything that they've rearranged, any shortcuts that they've created, their start menu that they've got, all that kind of stuff. And it will keep a copy of that on a server somewhere, and then it will be copied to any other computers that they log on to. So if they log on to a second machine the next day, it'll copy that profile information down from the server to their second computer. That way they still have the same environment, same desktop background, same shortcuts that they created on the desktop, same start menu, and so on. Then we also have a member of item here, which is Bisbee users. Okay, so that's how this is all going to work. One thing I've got to do, though, is make this a little bit more automatic than what we see here. Now, the problem with this is that's still a lot of typing. Plus, none of this works on its own. I could type this in and create a user account, for example, but I can't just type this by itself. That doesn't do anything. I couldn't just type that by itself. The command prompt would just say unknown command or something like that. So none of this is really doing me a whole lot of good yet. What I need to do, first of all, is to create a whole bunch of these, because that would then get me further on the path to automation. Really, the way it is right now, it's really more work than it's worth. So here I want to create 50 users, let's say. How would I do that? I'd use the magic of autofill. You see, if I move my mouse pointer to the lower right where the little box is, my cursor turns into a cross. If I click and drag down through here, look what it's going to do. I'm now able to create 50 user accounts. Okay, let's go right to here. Okay, and look at what it's done. By the magic of what we call autofill, it automatically increments by 1 all the way down through here. Now I have all of that. However, it's still not good enough, because I still have to find a way to combine all of these into a single statement. Right now, they're all in their own individual cells. Well, again, using my magic Excel skills here, I've used the concatenate item, and this gives you an instruction to paste these lines into a batch file. I've concatenated B2, C2, D2, E2, F2, G2, H2, I2, J2. Okay? In other words, all of this stuff. Concatenate all of that into what you see down here. Now, again, used autofill to fill all of this in. So now I'm just going to use my mouse pointer to go on down through here. Once I've selected all of the lines, I'm going to press Control-C to copy that into my clipboard. And then I go over here, where I'm actually going to go to, let's go to Notepad here. So I'm going to open up Notepad. And I'm going to paste all those lines in here. Now you can see what's going to happen here is, if I create this as a batch file, it's going to put all of that on a continuous line, on a single line, and it's going to create Bisbee user 1 with all of these parameters. I've got to put my pause statement in before I forget. Now I'm going to go ahead and just save this. Do notice that when you save it, you don't want a TXT extension. You want a batch file extension, which is BAT. So I have to put this in quotation marks, and I'll call this Bisbee users. Okay, .bat. All right. Now I'll click on Save, and then I'll go to this item, and there's my Bisbee users. Right now, notice that I only have these that I worked with earlier, just kind of default accounts that I've been working with. But now when I right-click on this and choose to run as administrator, because I have to be administrator to create accounts, click on Yes, then we see that it's going through this and creating a whole bunch of accounts. At this point, it is saving me time as opposed to going through the UI and creating all of these manually, or any other method. Really, this is actually a very efficient method in the long run. Now, if we take a look at this, we still don't see anything until we refresh the screen and look at all of that. Okay, so if I take a look at a sample account, Bisbee user 09. Now, if I take a look at my account here, there's my user principal name that was specified. I said that the user must change password at the next logon. We know what their passwords are, but that's okay for now. The profile item is also all filled in for us. It's connecting to drive H, specifying the locations there. So we're really good here. We've been able to create a whole bunch of accounts very easily. This is very nice for creating lab accounts, classroom accounts, training accounts, things like that, where users might not use their literal name. They might be assigned to, Bisbee user 14. Okay, so something like that. Now, otherwise, if this is not suitable and I want to actually use real people's names, that's easy too. I just have to go in here and say Jim, Hansen. Okay, or I'll put in here whatever their other name is. And for some reason, Excel just stopped responding on me. Thanks, Excel, right when I'm trying to demonstrate something. Anyway, if you take a look at this top line here, you can see that just by entering in that username here on the left, it automatically fills it in any other place where that name appears. And so that would be very easy to then add other, real names throughout the rest of this list. Next, then, you can also use some additional items to pipe together. For example, if I use dsquery, I can use that in conjunction with dsmod or dsget. Let me see if I can find an example. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. If we take a look at dsquery in this sense, we have a dsquery and we're looking for a user, any user actually, in the OU of Bisbee. Since we didn't specify a specific user with a CN equals, then it's going to give us all users in this OU, and then this domain component, as you can see. Then we use the pipe command, which is the shift backslash. Okay, that's how you'll get that item. And then that will take the results of this and pipe it over here to dsmod. In other words, take these results and send them to this next command, which is to modify the group membership so that we put them into the common name equals Bisbee users security group in the OU of Bisbee and the nugalab.com. And what we're doing here is add members there. Now, before I run this, let's go ahead and take a look at the membership that we have there. Let's just pick a random account here. And you can see that right now they're not a member of that account, that member of that security group. So if we go to member of here, yeah, sure enough. It doesn't look like, I'm not going to go through all of them, but it doesn't look like they're a member right now. So if I add member here, we see that it succeeded. I think 23 was the first one I looked at. Now we see that member of Bisbee users. Okay, how about this user? Member of Bisbee users. See, we've been able to add all of these users to the Bisbee users security group, which you can see right down here. And if we double click there and choose members, a little bit easier to see all the membership. Okay, so we see that we've added pretty much everybody into that. Likewise, very similarly, if we wanted to remove all of those members, we would just say rmmBr. So now we would remove all of those members, and if I go back to that BISB users security group and choose members, they're all gone. Okay, so I just kind of wiped out everything. That's why this thing is very automatic, but at the same time, it's extremely powerful and potentially destructive. So you got to be sure that you really know what you're doing with these first, and always test them in a lab environment first. You can wipe out an entire department by doing this kind of stuff. So you got to really be careful. Let's take a look at another thing that we could do, and I already typed this in. What if I wanted to go ahead and take from this domain root any BISB user name, okay, and I want to get their department. I want to find out what department they belong to. This is the syntax that I would use, just dsquery user, starting at the domain root, anything that starts with the name BISB user, and it'll tell me their SAM ID department. So we can see here that everybody is in copper mining. Now you didn't see me enter that in, but offline here I just went over to select all these users and add them, and I went to their properties here. And then all you have to do here, if you want to use the UI for this kind of thing, is just check which item you want and then type it in. If you don't check it, then it's grayed out and you can't really type anything in there. Okay, that's kind of how I got that started at least. And also, we're going to be getting to this later, but you can see here some of the PowerShell items that I would have to type to do that as well if I wanted to use that instead. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look also at how I can move an entire portion of my directory structure. My OU structure. So here's BISB down here. Again, it's just kind of dangling. Really ought to be an AZ for Arizona. So what I'm going to do with this is to move that BISB organizational unit into the AZ organizational unit. So I'm just going to go ahead and clear the screen that we were working with earlier over here. Let's go CLS. And then I'm just going to paste in something. Actually, I've got this all in Notepad. I got a cheat sheet of my own over to the side, so I don't have to type all this in manually, except that I left a letter out. So ds move, and then we're going to move the OU of BISB, and you can see the rest here, to a new parent of OU is AZ. Okay, so let's look at the background here. Okay, there's BISB. We should see that move up here to AZ. So press Enter, and we see that it succeeded. Now, I don't see that quite yet. But if I go to the domain and refresh the screen, we'll see that now BISB is not down here anymore. But if I expand out AZ, we see that we now have BISB up here. Notice that before BISB used to be capitalized, but when I moved it, it became lowercase. Why? Because that's what I specified in the command line. Not really a big deal, but some things are case sensitive, so you have to be aware of that. If I wanted that to be, case sensitive, I would have to type in an uppercase B here. Now then, if it really bothers me that it's not capitalized properly, I can go to ds move, specify that OU, and then specify a new name, and then this time a capital BISB, and we'll see now that if I refresh the screen up here, that we now have a capital BISB again. So now what if we don't have copper mining anymore down in BISB? Remember we have all these users and they're part of the copper mining department. So what if we needed to trim the whole tree out here? Okay, hate to do that. Kind of makes me feel heartless to do this, but I might need to get rid of those users and get rid of the entire BISB division. Maybe they're just not performing or something like that. So what I would do here is I would just do a DSRM for remove. I can say no prompt, in other words, don't say yes to everything. And then a subtree of the BISB OU, of the OU AZ, and you see the rest of the path there, and press Enter. And then if we go back in here, where am I at here? Let's go to my nuggetlab.com here and refresh the screen. Now we'll see that when we go back down to AZ, that BISB is indeed gone. Alright, now we've already covered the rest of this, dsmove and dsrm. Let's take a look at PowerShell, and I think the best way to do this one is really just by way of demonstration. What we need to do with this one is it depends upon a couple of PowerShell commandlets, and it depends upon a CSV file. That's going to be the source data for the accounts that it's going to create. A lot of people, if they need to export data out of SQL, they like to use SQL CMD. It's not really part of the exam, but just so you know, if you need to extract something out of a SQL database, that might be what you want to use. And when it comes to PowerShell, there's a commandlet that we're going to take advantage of here. And that's not it. So let's take a look at here. There it is. And it's going to be the new AD user. So I'm going to type help new AD user -full. That gives you all the available help for that particular commandlet. And we can see, wow, a whole bunch of stuff up here. Sometimes I leave this kind of stuff on my screen to make it look as if I'm very, very involved and in-depth in work. My wife came into the office the other day and she said, "Hey, honey, can you help me with the dishes?" Well, I happen to have this up here, and I pointed to it and I said, "Honey, as you can very well see, I've got important work right in front of me here." Yes, James, once again, got out of doing the dishes. Just part of the glory of having a home office, I guess. Okay, anyway, we can use new AD user and then look at all of the various things. I mean, this is probably just about most, if not all, of the attributes that you would enter into a user account. Let me just find one real quick to double click on. For all of the various attributes here, the telephone number, address, telephones, organization, all of the stuff that we see there is pretty well represented in these various options. Now, it's still really way more work than it's worth to create a new user from scratch, just typing everything in. This would just make you insane to have to do that every time you had to create a new user. So really, this takes advantage of being able to import a CSV and then using variables for all of these things. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do with this for right now. I just wanted to point out that just about any kind of variable that you want, you can use. You don't have to use all of them. The only one that's absolutely required is the new AD user, and then you have to have a name. You have to have that. You don't actually even have to have a password, but if you don't, it'll be disabled by default. But just FYI, that's what you'll be working with. So let's go ahead and take a look at the other components that we have here as well. I'm going to show you the script itself. That's right here. Okay, this is this, and I've used word wrap so that we can kind of see everything in one, but normally this actually will appear on a single line. And then we have an import bulk users.csv. Now this was simply created, again, using my spreadsheet. I'll go to my spreadsheet. Again, this will be available for you on nuggetlab.com. And I just created the first line here, and I filled in all the pertinent data. And then I just used that autofill function, and I created 100 lines of users. This goes down to user 100. Okay. So then I saved it as a CSV and brought it over here, and here it is. Here's the resulting data there. Each one of these columns here that you saw in the spreadsheet now has a value up here at the top that relates to a column called name, and this first value corresponds to name. Same account name corresponds to what's in this position. Common name, what's in this position. That's kind of repetitive at the beginning there, I get it. Surname, Jones. Description, training account. Department, training lab. Path, the full distinguished name path to where we want this account to go. And that's kind of useful because we wouldn't want to just dump all the user accounts into the the user's container. Okay, it's kind of an indiscriminate way to create those accounts. And then you can see that there's a password and the account is enabled. Okay, so this is the raw data that I want to use, and I want to use this script to peek into that data and extract everything from it and use it to create these user accounts. Now then, let's go through the script and see what it's actually doing. The first thing is it's going to call on a commandlet, which is just import CSV. This doesn't really do anything on its own. It just calls out certain data that we need to use, that we need to send to another commandlet in this case. And it also says just operate this in the same directory as the script itself appears. And you can see here that the CSV and the script itself are both in the same directory. Otherwise, instead of this, we would enter in the full path. And then we're going to pipe that with for each object. So what's the for item here? Well, for is used for a lot of different things in programming and in batch files. And basically, you can use it to create certain kinds of loops, or you can have it go from one line to the next, to the next, to the next in something like this CSV file. So basically, it's saying for each line in this CSV, we want to be able to work with certain kinds of data, and we'll get to the rest of this here in a moment. The other thing it's doing is it's going to provide a user principal name, which is going to consist of, again, whatever is in. See the $_ dot? That means whatever is in the SAM account name. All right. And if we take a look at our data here, the SAM account name is Phoenix user 01 for that first field, and then 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. Okay. So it's going to take the same account name, and it's going to tack onto that the at nuggetlab.com. The squiggly brackets don't actually appear in the final product, but at nuggetlab.com. So it's going to be Phoenix user 01 at nuggetlab.com, for example. Now, the next thing it's going to do is going to create a new AD user, or Active Directory user. How's it going to construct that? Well, it needs certain items. It's going to have a SAM account name, and it's going to say, for the SAM account name, I want the SAM account name to be whatever appears in the same account name column for each user. For the name, whatever appears in the name column. For the display name, we're going to still use the same value that appears in the name column. For the given name, the common name if we have one, surname, and so on. You can see it goes all the way down through here, and it just mirrors whatever appears in each one of those. So again, wherever you see the $_dot, you can just interpret that as whatever appears in, and then whatever follows it, such as the path. And that's important here because we, again, want the path to be not just a generic users container, but we want to put it where we want it to go in the Phoenix users. In this case, as you can see that distinguished name down there. Okay, and that's pretty good here for now. I will point out that with this account password, normally it doesn't like to have an insecure string. So what we can do here is it says convert to secure string, but it's really not secure, because you can see it appears in plain text. And we'll force it to be as plain text with a dash force. Otherwise, PowerShell doesn't really like that. You just have to be careful of this for security purposes. We're going to enable the account, and the password will never expire. Now, I'm not saying that I recommend all of these items and exactly the way I'm doing it. I'm just proving that we can import accounts the way we see here. Okay, so we're going to see this script work here in just a moment. So we'll just go to our Windows PowerShell. I'm running this as administrator, and I'm in the scripts directory. I'm just going to import bulk users.ps1, and I'll press enter, and look at it fly. It's just creating 100 users, probably by the time I run out of breath, which some of you think that may never happen. But indeed, I could run out of breath right about now. Okay? See, it did get to the end right before I ran out of breath. And then if we go into Active Directory users and computers, and go up to Phoenix users, nobody's there until, again, I refresh the screen, and voila, there's all my users. And if we take a look at some of the properties, remember, we had a description item. Well, that came through just fine. Here's the first name, the last name, the display name, all of those things appear. Over on the Organization tab, we see that we did have a department that appears as well. And again, I could have used dash, company, or dash manager, dash job title, anything else that I wanted to include in that, for which there was data in the comma-separated value file, would have also come across. In this nugget, we continued our discussion of Active Directory, specifically automating account creation. We took a look briefly at LDIFDE as well as CSVDE. Remember, I've got a PDF file on nuggetlab.com for you to look for sample data there. We took a look at DSAdd as well. This is going to be something that's probably more commonly used than LDIF or CSVDE. DSAdd also has some cousins that we saw: DSGet, DSQuery, DSRemove, DSMod, all those different kinds of things that you can use. Then we concluded here with PowerShell. I showed you how to work with the basic CSV data, the kind of format that it needs to have, the kind of data that you might want to put in it. You can add or subtract whatever suits your own purposes. And then I also showed you the PowerShell script that you can use, and you can again modify that for your own purposes as well. That will be available for you up on nuggetlab.com. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.